A young boy hits his older sister, and no matter what you tell him, he just keeps doing the same thing over and over again. There is a simple psychological strategy. If you employ it, he will stop doing what he's doing immediately, inshallah. Find out what it is. This is Changing Behavior, Part 2. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Amma ba'd. So we said the young boy hits his older sister and he doesn't stop that behavior. It's a very simple technique. Basically what you do is you seek his advice on how to fix his same problem. So you can walk up to this boy, let's say his name is Hassan. So you tell him, Hassan, I need your advice on something. I need you to help me with something. And the reason I'm asking you is that it's happening to a young man your age, so you know the mentality and everything. Perhaps you can tell me what to do with him. Basically, this young man, he hits his sister, and as you know, this is not proper behavior. What do you think? You know how a 12-year-old thinks. What can I tell him to get him to stop this behavior? So what Hassan's gonna do now, he's gonna start to count to you all the things that you can go and tell this young man. He's gonna tell him that this is not part of the behavior of the Muslim. The Muslim is the one who people are safe from his hand and safe from his tongue. Tell him that the Prophet ﷺ said that he's not from amongst us who does not respect the elderly and have mercy on the younger. And then tell him, every time he's giving you what to tell that young man, which is him, he feels really guilty and uncomfortable. Psychologists tell you that human beings, we don't like to be uncomfortable like this, and we don't like to contradict. We like to be consistent. So as he's telling you what to advise that young man, he's starting to feel worse and worse and worse for what he's doing. And so when you seek his advice and you seek his help, that will further catapult him into stopping that behavior. It will help him stop that behavior more so than if you just tell him, stop the behavior all the time. All right, this same technique. Now, again, remember we said when we started on Changing Behavior, episode 1, we said that we're going to use the same tool in completely different scenarios. Here's a scenario. And actually there's a narration about this, but it is a weak narration. I just want to use the example, but yes, we're aware that it's a weak narration. And it's a popular one too. It's about Hassan and Hussein, the grandchildren of the Prophet ﷺ, when they saw the old man making the wudu incorrectly. Now, you know, you can't just walk up to an old man who's been making wudu like that before you were even born and just, uncle, let me tell you something, uncle. You're doing this incorrectly. Watch me. Let me show you how it's done. It's not respectable, and he's not going to accept it from you like that. So they were smart and they were aware of that, and they did something intelligent. They went up to him and they said, Uncle, my brother and I were having a dispute as to which one of us does the wudu in the more proper way. So we're both gonna make wudu in front of you, and you're gonna judge between us and tell us who's doing it properly. And so Al-Hasan makes the wudu the same way the Prophet ﷺ did it. Then Al-Hussein makes the wudu the same way the Prophet ﷺ. Then they tell the uncle, judge between us. The uncle looks at them and he says, rather, it is I who used to do the wudu improperly, and now I have learned it from both of you. Because of this technique, it's as if they were seeking his advice, but he got to see that he was the one mistaken, and he accepted it because the way they approached him allowed him to save face. He doesn't have to be embarrassed and, oh, these kids showed me how to do it and I've been doing it wrong for so many years. It allowed him to save face, and he accepted the advice much easier than had they come up to him and said, Uncle, you're wrong. You're 6 to 7, you should know better. Let me show you how it's done. That would be very rude, wouldn't it? So far, that's technique number 1 in today's episode. Number 2, you want someone to change behavior. Maybe there are a number of behaviors you want to set. Maybe a number of bad habits that they have, and you want to change a number of them. Which one do you pick? A couple of guidelines. Number 1, pick one that's easy to change. And if you can also make that same one or find one that not just easy to change, but also will make them feel good. This creates what psychologists call momentum. Momentum is when you start a change, makes you feel good, and it gets you moving in the right direction. So let's say there are 7 things you want to change about a person, 7 bad habits. Now, am I going to list all 7 and say, now go do your homework and change all 7? That's too much. Maybe I'll pick number 4. because it's an easy one to change. He knows he has to change all 7, but when we start with number 4 and it changes and he feels like I'm making progress, that creates momentum. Number 3 will be easier after that, and 5 will be easier after that. So number 1, pick one that's easy to change and will create momentum. It's preferable if it's one that makes him feel good. Or it could also be like you focus on the most important one. For example, a man doesn't pray and he smokes. Which one do you start with here? No doubt you will start with the prayer first. And the prayer by its structure and by how it's designed will eliminate any other bad sin, inshallah, over time. But you start with that. If you start by attacking what he loves, which is the cigarettes, not only does he love them, he's chemically addicted to them. So the guy doesn't pray and your main concern is smoking is haram, brother. Smoking is haram. And so you're just going to get into this thing. It's not going to work out like that. So that means I start with something easy that will create momentum and get him to feel good, or I start with the most important thing first. And if the person has, like I said, 9 bad traits, I don't even mention the other 8. Let me start with number 1. You don't want to overwhelm people. That's the important point. So when you're trying to get someone to change, don't overwhelm them and say, look, brother, I'm going to tell it to you straight. You need to change this, and I've been watching you. Change this, and change that, and change that. Don't do that. You're just going to overwhelm them. And they're also going to dislike you probably as well. So what do we have so far? We said number 1, seek the person's advice with a similar problem that they have. And you can just describe a similar scenario or something like that and say, how can I help someone who has this issue or has this problem? All right? Number 2, start with something simple to create momentum, to get them feeling good and starting to see changes happening in their life. All right, how about one more then for this episode? And this is actually a technique that I learned when I was taking a class on research methods. And the professor did something very interesting. He allowed us, the students, to set our grading scale. You know how in the beginning of class the professor says the midterm is 30% of the grade, the final exam is 40% of the grade, homework is 20%, attendance is 5%, right? That's called the grading scale. And this professor, he allowed us, the students, to decide what we wanted. So, needless to say, it was a big mess. We decided that just showing up for class, that's 30% of the grade, homework was 30% of the grade, the midterm was 20% of the grade, and the final exam was 4% of your grade. That was actually the easiest final exam I've ever studied for because I didn't study for it. That's how easy it was. Now, people were puzzled why he allowed us to do that, but nobody spoke to him. So I went to him in his office and I said, why would you allow us to not care about your midterm in such a way? So he said, research has shown, and he teaches research methods, research has shown that when you allow people to set their own goals, they make a greater effort to live up to these goals or to accomplish these goals. Versus if I come and say, look, you have to do this by that date, you really won't do it. But if you say, I have to do this by that date, you'll put a great effort into doing that. So now, look, what we're talking about here, the tools. Take that tool and apply it in a completely different scenario. All this professor gave me at that moment was this tool. And now look at how we applied it in completely different scenarios. One day, a woman, a sister, comes to me at the university, and I was like the Muslim chaplain there. So she comes with her problem. She's crying. And she says, I'm doing my PhD and I work full time and I have a child and I'm married and I come home and I've got so much to do. From the clothing to the laundry, the vacuuming, the cooking, the cleaning, the dishes and everything. And my husband doesn't help me. He just sits on the couch, he watches television. And if in the process of trying to do all these things, I burn the cooking or the food or what have you, he starts yelling and gets upset. He doesn't help me. How can I get my husband to help me? I asked her a question. I even felt foolish after asking the question. I said, have you ever asked him to help you? She said, yes. So what happens? Well, he helps around for a day or two, and then third day he goes back to his old ways. Sits on the couch, watches television, starts yelling and demanding things to be perfect. And I have to do all the things and wash, put the kid to bed and feed the kid and do the dishes and everything and do my PhD work and get ready for work tomorrow. And she's crying now, right? So now we're going to use that same tool I got from the professor. Very simple. You're going to take a piece of paper and a pen and sit down in front of your husband and list all the things that you have to do. And mashallah, any sisters, they're very good at being able to list things immediately. So she's going to say, look, I have to do this and this and this and this. Give him a whole list of all the chores that you have. Now you know this is impossible. I work full time and I've got my PhD and everything. You need to help me with something. Now give him the piece of paper and let him write down what he's going to do in the house. So let's say he writes the vacuum. Now, vacuuming, right? And tell him, no, that's not enough because there's still this and this. Okay, fine. I'll do the vacuuming, I'll do the dishes, I'll do the laundry as well. Until you're satisfied with his chores. Then what happens, put that piece of paper away, and what's going to happen after 3 days? We know what he's going to do. He's going to go back to his old ways, sitting on the couch, and he's not going to do the things he said he's going to do. Now that piece of paper becomes something different. It becomes a license to nag. Now you can nag him, and he won't yell because he used to yell at her. Now he can't yell because when she starts nagging him, what? You didn't do the dishes, there's dirt all over the place, you didn't vacuum the place. He gets upset. So, wait a minute. Did I ask you to do these things? Here it is. You said you were going to do these things, so do them. Let's see if it worked. Months later, the same sister comes, not crying this time, big smile on her face. She said, Alhamdulillah, he picked the chores and he's still doing them until today, alhamdulillah. So we can call this episode, How to Train Your Husband. Okay, just kidding. But the point is that I just want you to see how the same tool can be used in completely different places. And that's what a psychological strategy is. And it's up to you to use your creativity and put the same technique in a different place, inshallah azza wa jal. Thank you for attentive listening. Sallallahu wa barak ala Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.